let's get started. It's 10 o'clock in Des Moines, and of course we have people from Europe as well on the as speakers. So my name is Rob Bertram. I'm the Chief Scientist for Resilience and Food Security in the U.S. Agency for International Development. And I'd like to just start by thanking FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, and the Alliance to End Hunger for hosting this annual event at the World Food Prize. It's always a treat to shine a light on the major issues that are the focus of the World Food Prize events. And of course, we will have our laureate joining us shortly. In the meantime, I would like to just remind all of those who are joining that the full bios for the speakers will be in presented in the chat box, so you can easily access those there. Also, please do introduce yourselves in the chat box as well. That would be great to know who's with us, and that way you can also connect with each other. And importantly, there's also the opportunity to post questions and answers in the Q&A box. And if you would indicate when you have a question who you'd like to pose it to in particular, that's welcome. That will help us direct the questions to the colleagues. We're going to try to keep this informal today. We do have a series of presenters to go through, but we also really want it to be a forum for discussion. So thank you again, all of you, for joining, and a huge thanks to our speakers who have come together today. And we're going to start by turning to Vimlendra Sharan. He is the director of FAO's Liaison Office for North America. So Vim, I know you have a treat in store for us, and I'll turn it to you, please.
Thank you, Rob. And greetings from North America, FAO office, and our co-host, Alliance to End Hunger, to everyone joining in today. We are meeting one day ahead of the World Food Day. October 16 is the World Food Day, and that also happens to be 75th anniversary of FAO. We were founded in 1945 in Quebec. And I think on this occasion, it's important for us to really pause and ponder on what we have achieved over 75 years and where we go from here. And one direction which I think we really need to take is to build more resilient and sustainable food systems going forward. And that's exactly what we are all meeting here today to discuss. First and foremost, let me congratulate this year's Food Laureate, Dr. Rattan, whose seminal work on soil-centric approach to sustainability has been instrumental in our understanding the role and importance of healthy soils in productive agricultural practices. It's also a very happy coincidence that for this event today, we have not one, but 3 Food Laureates joining us. A very warm welcome to David Beckmann, the 2010 Food Laureate, and Dr. Lawrence Haddad, the 2018 Food Laureate. So there are 3 Food Laureates speaking to us today. We will soon be hearing from both of them. And though not Food Laureates yet, but who knows, they may soon be, we also have Máximo Torero, Chief Economist at FAO, and Martin Frick, Deputy to the Special Envoy for the 2021 Food System Summit, joining us. As I said, in these 75 years, the world has made great progress in fight against poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. Agriculture productivity and agri-food systems have also come a long way, yet we'll all agree that much needs to be done still. We have over 700 million people suffering from chronic hunger and over 2 billion from one or the other form of malnutrition. Conflict, extreme weather conditions have stretched our resources, and COVID-19, of course, has unleashed unprecedented health and economic and social crisis around the world. It's quite a hole that we have dug ourselves in, and it is necessary that we really build back better. And to understand really what are the elements of this building back better, we hear this phrase so often, the new normal and building back better, but what does it actually mean? And this is where our speakers will really delve into and share with us their idea of building back a much more resilient, much more sustainable food system, which can take on shocks and turbulence going ahead. We will start today's event with a video message from our Director General, Cho Dong-hyu. But before we do that, I must place on record my deepest appreciation and gratitude to Barbara Stinson, President of the World Food Prize, for all her help and support, and also for finding time to join us at this event today. She will also be shortly speaking to all of us. Barbara, big congratulations to you for having so successfully pulled off this event. I can well imagine how difficult it must have been to do a virtual event of this size. So many congratulations to you and your team. Last but not the least, before the video cues up, I would like to acknowledge Rob Bertram, Chief Scientist at USAID Bureau for Resilience and Food Security. I've heard Rob a lot of time. I've interacted with him on many occasions, and I sincerely do not think we could have wished for a more knowledgeable and informed moderator for this event than Rob. So you are in good hands, that I'm sure of. So thank you, everyone. And I am looking forward to a very, very interesting session today. So let's start by queuing up the video. James.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, the World Food Day found its origin in the birthday of FAO UN on 16th October 1945. This year is a very special one for FAO and for the global fight against hunger and malnutrition. 75 years ago today, out of the debris of the World War II, millions lost their lives in the conflict. Millions more died of the starvation. Farming was devastated. The world needed to rebuild agriculture and to meet the most basic of the human needs. Nations come together. FAO UN was established first. And we delivered. FAO harnessed everything at our disposal: expertise, research, statistics, diplomacy, to have the world produce more, to feed more. In the first 25 years of FAO's existence, farmer output increased by 70%. But feeding the world was not just about more hectares and more tractors. In the second quarter century of the FAO's existence, we worked to make the green revolution greener and bluer too. We became drawing the world attention to safeguarding the oceans and the seas. We promoted the aquaculture, and we targeted and defeated and treated animal disease. The third quarter century saw a great push for sustainability. We worked to empower smallholder farmers. We promoted a package of solutions for the global food security. We underscored that there was no such thing as an end to hunger without application of innovation, responsible investment, accessible trade of commodities, and empowering women and youth. Of the 75 years that FAO has been in existence, we have grown, nourished, and sustained the gift of our soil, the livelihoods of our people, the legacy of our planet. Today begins the next quarter century of FAO's story, a time to look back at our successes, but also a measure of the distance left to travel. and more importantly, to look forward to the new era. Clearly, our work is not done yet. After diminishing steadily, and the nourishment is increasing again. Too many children are still wasted or stunted. Billions of people cannot afford a healthy diet as civilization moves on. Crucially, the next phase in our history starts amid the wreckage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. It was led by the fragility of our agri-food systems, the precociousness of the agricultural labor force, the thin line that separates many families from destitution. Dear colleagues and friends, now it's a time to show ourselves worthy of the FAO's founders, who rose to the occasion 75 years ago. We have made a good start with our comprehensive COVID-19 response and recovery program. It focuses on data collection, poverty reduction programs, trade and food safety standards, and preparedness against the next zoonotic pandemics. But in the longer term, nothing less than a radical transformation of agri-food systems will be needed to bring us closer to the hunger-free world. This, for FAO, presupposes the flat, more agile, and modular structure, a relentless push for the digitalization, joining the hands across the government, academia, civil society, and the private sector, and the constant pursuit of the innovation and the scientific excellence. The world is looking to us to put our actions where our words are, to be think tanker and action tanker rolled into one. Alongside our partners, we must be knowledge generators and facilitators all at once, together in the quest for the ultimate public good, a world free of poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. Tomorrow begins today. So on this World Food Day, allow me to thank and congratulate you, my colleagues and friends. Allow me also to spur you on to the even greater efforts until World Food Day comes, when we can look back and say, mission accomplished. Thank you.
What a great message that was from Dr. Chu. And Barbara, I don't know about you, but I was thinking that wouldn't it be great if we can have him come in person next year and give such an inspiring message at the World Food Prize. Maybe Vim and all of us can work on that. You know, I'm just noting we're almost at 300 participants, so we have a fantastic audience, and as Vim has said, a really very impressive set of panelists here with us today. And I want to just pick up one thing about the title of the session before I turn to our next speaker, and that is that the sustainability issue is right at the heart of this year's laureate, Dr. Rattan Lal's work, and we need that, and that's a clear focus here. But the other important part is that nutrition and food security. The whole world is thinking about food systems now and next year, and resilience and sustainability are critical pieces of that we'll be focusing on today. But I'm so glad that FAO and the Alliance have framed this around the needs of the vulnerable still, the needs of the people whose nutritional needs are not being met for a variety of reasons. And I know we're going to hear more about those as we go forward. So again, thanks. I think as we all go forward into this framing of food systems, let's continue to make sure that they meet the needs of those whose needs are not being met because of lack of either food is too expensive, a quality diet unaffordable, they're just too poor, whatever the solutions are, the gender piece, there's a whole range of things that I'm sure our speakers will touch on them. So now I'd like to turn to our next speaker, and David Beckmann is the co-sponsor here. He is President Emeritus of the Alliance to End Hunger, and he, as Vim said, was a World Food Prize laureate, is a World Food Prize laureate from 2010, and it's a great honor to have him here and to have the Alliance to End Hunger co-sponsoring this event with FAO. David, over to you.
Well, it's an honor to co-sponsor this event with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. And this year we have the special honor of remarks from Professor Lal, this year's laureate. What a remarkable human being. A lot of us just listened to the celebration, the main celebration, the presentation of the World Food Prize. And it's just amazing that he was the only child in his family who knew how to read. And his legacy of research really is a major contribution to the world's progress toward sustainable, healthy food for everybody. The Alliance to End Hunger is focused on building the political will to end hunger. We're a coalition of 90 diverse organizations, corporations, universities, nonprofits, faith organizations, individuals, and we're all working together to build the public and political will that is really crucial for moving forward toward the kind of world that we want. I just want to stress first that as we think about Professor Lal's career, it's important to remember that the United States government has been a really important funder of agricultural research, and that especially since the world food crisis of 10 years ago, that the United States has really provided leadership, or at least some of the leadership, for a major mobilization of agricultural investment all over the world. We've seen how important, as America, I'm an American, and from an American perspective, I just see that our government's action in this sphere has been quite important. But huge decisions are being made right now. So here I'm speaking especially to people who are living in the United States, but the President and Congress may pass another very large COVID relief package yet this month. They're all talking about it. It's a matter of getting to an agreement. And if they do pass it, it's likely to include $10 to $20 billion of additional international aid to low-income countries around the world. That'll make a difference in how they're able to deal with COVID and the related hunger crisis. So this is just from me. It's not from the Borlaug Forum, or it's just from me. But if you live in the United States today, take your cell phone or a PC and call up the websites of your two senators, and if you agree with this, ask them to approve a COVID relief bill this month and to include international aid. They need to feel that this is something that's important to other people, that folks are watching them, and they won't get much mail about international aid. So if half of the 300 people in this forum write, we'll make a difference. And then it goes without saying, but we're in the middle of a hugely consequential US election. And so for those of us who are connected to people in this country, it is really, really incumbent on people like us. I mean, extraordinary, wonderful people come to the Borlaug Dialogue every year. And, but it's really important for us to then do everything we can in the next few weeks to elect political leaders who will put political heft behind the aspirations that we're all talking about during the Borlaug Dialogue. Thanks for joining in this session.
Thank you, David, and also thank you to Vim. Our two co-sponsors have really framed the event today in such compelling terms. So now I'd like to turn to the Executive Director of the World Food Prize. I hope I have that right, Barbara. I don't have there we go. President, sorry, the World Food Prize Foundation. I apologize for that. And Barbara Stinson. As Vim said, Barbara has pulled off an amazing feat with her team this year to do this World Food Prize, the Borlaug Dialogues, everything in a virtual format. And we're just so grateful for her leadership and that she is setting such a high standard to continue the high standards of the World Food Prize as really the global forum where we come together to think about the issues that Dr. Chu, Vim, and David just now have pointed us to, and how do we really comprehensively solve the challenges of hunger and poverty and food insecurity, especially in a sustainable way. So Barbara, it's a great pleasure to turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Rob. And I'm so pleased to be here for this annual co-hosted event. The World Food Prize events going on all week this week are alongside the UN Committee on Food Security meetings. And so therefore, we're able to experience so much more. And we'll continue in this vein, I promise you. Let me say that hopefully just before this, were able to witness the Laureate ceremony, and we'll say more about that. But if not, it's recorded and you can view it anytime today. So we're working under the theme of building resilience in the food system this year, as everyone is. Food systems resilience and addressing the quantity, quality, and availability of food for all has always been important. It's been our moniker for 50 years. Been our moniker here at the foundation for 30+ years. But now we are all coming to, we see the world converging on the absolute need to address all the needs of the food system simultaneously. Safe, affordable, nutritious, equitably accessed, sustainable food systems. It's such a tall demand. And we're experiencing this year in our dialogue where we convene global experts on so many topics in so many fora throughout the week. And we know also from what we're hearing from the CFS that we must address it all. We cannot choose and have trade-offs between these various components. We have to be able to provide all of it. So hearing brilliant comments from all sectors on all the elements needed to advance these prime directives and to do it at the same time has just been so inspiring. But I want to reflect the strength of Dr. Chu's commitment and his charge to us to go from a think tank, not that everything's a think tank at all, but move from think tank to action tank. That's what we're doing this year in our dialogue, trying to uncover and knit together those actions that are needed to be able to do all of the above. So we've been focused on a variety of solutions in the dialogue itself, and I'll just say a couple of words about, of course, the solution in global climate change from soil health, solution to it, at least part of the solution. Shifts needed in investments on everything from the CG system priorities to smallholder farmers and SMEs around the world, and leveraging policy and regulation, consumer behavior channels and private investors, that leveraging that was called for yesterday in our nutrition panel. It's really a call to action that the entire community, the global food security community is convening around. We heard yesterday in the Monday in the investment roundtable discussion, a compelling statement. We need to think about the cost of not pivoting and making all the changes that are needed now. The cost of not simultaneously addressing food security, nutrition security, environmental health, all of these. If you want to look at the implications of not doing it all, they're much higher cost. So we're looking forward to summarizing all of the outcomes of all of these events. The social media are going wild, so it's wonderful. And I just really look forward to continuing the dialogue, the impact throughout the year. I want to turn now to my major charge, which is to introduce our 2020 World Food Prize laureate. As I say, the virtual ceremony just took place, where truly the Nobel Prize for Agriculture was awarded to Dr. Rattan Lal. He is the distinguished professor at The Ohio State University. He is winning this award for developing and mainstreaming a soil-centric approach to increasing food production that restores land, conserves natural resources, and mitigates climate change. And that's the brilliance of it. He has benefited livelihoods for more than 500 million smallholder farmers and improved food security and nutritional security of more than 2 billion people. We're so excited to recognize this man whose scientific achievements improve the quality, quantity, and availability of food for all. His work epitomizes what our founder, Dr. Norman Borlaug's philosophy suggests. Science is meaningless if it does not serve humanity. So Dr. Lal, thank you so much for your service to humanity, for your commitment, and we all look forward to hearing from you today.
Over to you, Rattan. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. First of all, Barbara, thank you so much for everything, your kind introduction. More importantly, but I just saw this ceremony. I have no words for it. Rob, thank you for inviting me to this event. Dr. Beckmann, Director of the North America FAO office. I want to repeat the word that Dr. Chu, the Director General of FAO, mentioned. The world is looking at us to put our words into action. And then President Stinson repeated those think tank to action tank. I think that is very correct what is currently needed. So in nature, to begin with, all things are hitched to one another. Therefore, health of soil, plants, animal, people, and ecosystem, and the planet is one and indivisible. With 7.5 billion people in 2020, projected to be 9.8 billion by 2050, human diet and social values are important to human and health of the planet. Resilient food systems that Robert mentioned matter, and they depend, of course, on soil health. That brings me to the question of the human health. A fingerprint of soil health can be improved by restoration of soil health of degraded, polluted, and contaminated soils. Restoration of soil organic matter content above the threshold range can improve soil health and nutritional quality of the food produced, and that's what we need to do. That brings me to how I define soil health, which is soil's capacity as a dynamic and biologically active entity within natural and man-made landscape to sustain multiple ecosystem services, including net primary productivity, food and nutritional security, biodiversity, water purification and renewability, carbon sequestration, air quality and atmospheric chemistry, elemental cycling for human well-being, and more importantly, for nature conservancy. To achieve this, basically, we are talking about looking at the coupled cycling of water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and other elements. The focus is on coupled cycling. And it is this coupling that leads to many ecosystem services that we just talked about. The human perturbation of the ecosystems can lead to decoupling of these elements. water from carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. And it is that decoupling that causes erosion, the algal bloom in water, the decline in soil productivity, the degradation of natural resources. Therefore, somehow we have to make sure that this coupling is maintained. And one of the things I can suggest as a cartoon example would be a genetically improved plant, Dr. Borlaug's concept philosophy, followed by many other plant breeders, where plant can communicate with managers through molecular-based signal. These plants grown with a no-till mulch farming cover cropping system. The only thing difference I would suggest is rather than dwarf variety, a better root system, deeper root system, more straw as well, because eventually that leads to the carbon health in the soil. And we integrate these plants, improve with trees and livestock. We improve soil health through soil organic matter content. So soil becomes disease suppressive, and we adopt integrated nutrient management. So that we have biofertilizer, rhizobium, mycorrhiza, etc. And if supplemental water and nutrients are needed, the focus is on supplement. We deliver them directly to plant roots through drip fertigation system. So the most of them are absorbed and a few are leaked into the environment. And that leads to the concept of fertilization with carbon through conservation agriculture, through cover cropping. So the focus is on CNPK rather than on NPK. If you have C before NPK, the need for NPK becomes less and less. Cover crop play a very important role. Recarbonization of the biosphere, improvement of soil health, soil quality is essential to water resources quality and quantity, to climate change mitigation adaptation, to food security quality and quantity, to biodiversity. In fact, is the engine of economic development. And that is what the soil-centric approach is. In fact, healthier soil, I think we have to recognize that, do not always translate into the highest yield at a given point in time. The objective is to sustain yield while at the same time improving the environment. Therefore, it may be prudent to accept yield reduction by 5 to 10% for sustaining health of the soil and ecosystem forever. And globally, humans waste 1 gigaton of food grains per year anyway, which I think is a crime against nature. So producing more and more and wasting more and more while ruining the environment is not a prudent strategy. The idea is to do both in a sustainable way. There is no justification for always aiming at the maximum potential yield and then wasting the resources and emitting greenhouse gases. I would like to think of this natural soil-centric approach as a pyramid. You have a global soil resources and carbon stock as the base of the pyramid. The 4 sides of this pyramid, number 1 is food security. Number 2, climate change adaptation mitigation. Number 3, land and soil restoration. Number 4, biodiversity, water quality, etc. The strength of this pyramid and the durability of the pyramid depends on where those 4 axes meet together. How are they glued together so the pyramid doesn't fall apart? And that glue, that strength comes from political governance, political willpower, prudent management, and political stability and peace. These are essential. And the basis of that peace and essentiality, as Dr. Norman Borlaug said, is the food stability and food security, access to healthy food. You cannot have peace and stability without having access to adequate and healthy food. I think the concern about soil is something we normally never hear about peak soil. We hear about peak oil, we hear about peak mineral resources, peak natural resources, peak soil indeed. We need 0.25 hectare per capita for obtaining all the basic necessity. In many countries, densely populated countries of Asia, especially 0.05 hectare per capita. That has forced and increased the land grab, which leads to, of course, civil unrest and many other incidents. It causes soil refugees. And I do not need to mention 70 million refugees that happened in 2019. And many of those refugees trying to jump into the Mediterranean to reach Europe had changed the political map of Europe. And those things really bring to this important part of peak soil. Do we have endangered soil? We certainly do. We talk about endangered butterfly, endangered panda, maybe bald eagle, many other things, animals. We have endangered soil. In fact, we have extinct soil that have lost their integrity because of degradation. That brings me to the question of rights of soil. Soil is a living entity. 25% of all biodiversity is in this topsoil. Just as there are universal rights of human beings and rights of animals, there must also be the rights of soil and rights of nature. And as the essence of all life, soils have the right to be protected, restored, thrive, and managed judiciously. Prime agricultural land and ecologically sensitive ecoregion must be protected. Urbanization especially, taking almost 3 to 4 million hectares of prime land under surface ceiling. Therefore, the question of the Growing Climate Solution Act of 2020, I greatly welcome that. By 4 senators, Senator Brown, Senator Stabenow, Graham, Senator Whitehouse, the agriculture and forestry sector, this act says, hold the potential to serve as a critical climate solution. I'm very glad to hear that statement. It also states, at a scale, agriculture and land use practice can sequester carbon at as low as $10 per metric ton of CO2, making it the most cost-effective carbon sequestration method currently. That is correct. It is a nature-based, most cost-effective. In fact, I would sometimes say negative cost, because we have many co-benefits. As companies and individual actors increasingly seek to offset emissions, activity in voluntary carbon markets has increased tremendously. The volume of credit generated through forestry and land use activity is growing very rapidly, increasing to 64% within the last 2 years, more than 12 times the other credit types. That brings me to the Soil Health Act. We do have agricultural sustainability, rights of soil part, which are essential to food security. We have Clean Air Act, we have Clean Water Act. This is absolutely the right time to have Healthy Soil Act. And that is exactly where the policy intervention and implementation through prudent governance, empowering farmers, especially the farmers in developing countries, 70% of them in sub-Saharan Africa being women, and empowering them through proper legislation is very critical. Very briefly, I want to go where we were and where we should be in agriculture. 1750 to 1850, population about 1 billion, crop yield of cereals less than 1 ton per hectare. In 1850 to 1950, animal power, oxen, horses, etc. Crop rotation, the crop yield went up to 3 to 4 tons, the population almost 3 billion. To 1975, Dr. Norman Borlaug brought us the Green Revolution. We have a population of 4 billion at that time. In 2000, improved cultivar, biotechnology, no-till farming started, integrated nutrient and pest management, carbon sequestration work started at that time. Between them and 2050, of course, the germplasm continues, precision agriculture, the irrigation, micro irrigation system, GMOs, many other things came up. Population went up to 7.6 billion. At present, during the last decade, eco-intensification, rhizosphere processes, the regenerative agriculture, the soil-less agriculture, the nexus approach, the phytobiomanagement, precision farming, soil restoration, healthy soil, the healthy diet, urban agriculture. The question is, what do we do between now and 2050? Recarbonization of the biosphere is number 1. Putting carbon back in soil, healthy diet, nutrition-sensitive agriculture, eco-intensive agriculture, restorative agriculture, soil-less agriculture, because soil has many other uses, urban agriculture, sky farming, space farming. These are some of the priorities amongst many other, which the idea is producing more from less. So we can return some of the land back to nature. We have the capacity to do that. The call for expanding horizontally by deforestation is absolutely not the right path to go. I'd like to end by stating that the world peace and stability really needs to be looked at more critically. What are the factors governing it? We do hear quite a lot about weapons of mass destruction. We forget one more important weapon of mass destruction, that's a hunger. 2,500 people dying per day. That is equal to about 80 jumbo jets crashing every day, day after day after day. And yet it is not a newsworthy item. That is the weapons of mass destruction. That is where the humanity brings about revolution. When people are starving, miserable, desperate, that is when they take the path of fanaticism and extremism. Dr. Borlaug said the same thing. The hungry stomach is no way to achieve peace and stability. Therefore, I would like to submit depleting soil organic matter content, declining soil fertility, degrading soils and denuding landscape, recurring drought intensifying heat waves, low crop yields and perpetual hunger, marginal living and desperateness are bigger threat to global peace and security than any other threat that we have seen. And these threats can only be addressed effectively by improving food and nutritional security. And the critical angle to improve nutrition and food security is restoration of degraded soils and ecosystem. Soil organic carbon management is one key indicator of that. And that is where I would like to focus. The reason Africa Green Revolution bypassed because the health of soil was ignored. This is a time to go back, restore those soils so we can bring agricultural improvement forever on a long-term basis. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, FAO, for inviting me. Thank you, Barbara, for the great honor and privilege to be the 50th laureate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lal. What a fantastic presentation. People all over the world are clapping. It was so compellingly, but also so elegantly stated, Rattan, the way you've taken this lifetime. I remember we met in the field in Africa, in the 1980s, and you were working on these issues then, and how you've built that to this, such a compelling theory. And you've also, I think, echo this idea from Dr. Chu about think tank to action tank. You really help us know exactly what that means. So thank you, and we're going to have time for Q&A. I hope you will stay with us and be here for those. We're going to move on now then to our next speaker. And speaking of going from think tank to action tank, another global leader in this space is Dr. Máximo Torero, from the chief economist in the Food and Agricultural Organization. And I just want to say, you know, we have a resilience theme that we've heard about today, so compellingly from Dr. Lal. The other big resilience theme right now is around what the world is experiencing with COVID and the impacts of a shock of a different kind on food systems and food security. And I just wanted to call out that Dr. Torero has been such a catalyzing leader in helping the world, governments, private sector, NGOs, international organizations step up to meet this current challenge. So just hats off to you, Máximo, on that. And now over to you.
No, thank you very much. It's a real honor for me to be here to hear this amazing talk by Dr. Rattan, and congratulations for the prize, Dr. Rattan. It's an honor for me to be here. Thank you very much for your kind words, Rob. So let me explain a little bit how we are looking at this, and I will go a little bit more extreme than what Dr. Xu went, saying that we need to declare the war to help people and to eliminate hunger of the world. It doesn't make any sense, the situation we are facing today. Even before COVID-19, 690 million people living in undernourishment, 2 billion people with not access to regular food, and 3 billion people that don't have access to healthy diets. It's unacceptable. And COVID-19, the only thing that it's doing is exacerbating even more the situation, which could increase undernourishment in 130 more million people. So we shouldn't be in this situation with the amount of food that we have available in the world, and we shouldn't be facing the challenges we are facing. Now, clearly, our farmers have shown that they are resilient. And they have shown, because if you look at your daily life during COVID-19, all of us have access to food. All of us could go to the supermarket or could go to the local markets and have food. So they have shown that despite the lockdowns and despite the problems we face, they were able to handle and they were able to produce what we needed, and we still have food. And food is available thanks to all of them today, and we have enough food available for all of us. The problem that we are going to face is a problem of access to food. It's a problem of the recession affecting the poorest, as always, increasing inequalities and making things more difficult. But despite these huge challenges, I think the position we have to take is a different one. It's a position of we need to fight this and we need to find a way to change what we are doing. And the examples that you provide on how to manage soil and how you can achieve all those goals, I think is a great example of the transformation we need to follow. But there are many other issues that we need to transform to be able to achieve SDG 2. Because if we continue as we are, we will never achieve it. We were not going to achieve it even before COVID-19. So let's take this problem of COVID-19, which for us is uncertainty, is a surprise, to try to change things and try to change the way we act and the way we operate today. I think we need to think completely different. And we need to think of an agricultural sector that has shown some level of resilience, but we need to change the resilience and increase the resilience of our sector. Today, we normally focus on resilience at the household level or at the farmer level. We rarely focus on the system. And that's a very complex issue. It's not a simple issue because we are talking of different players and we want to increase resilience on all those players. And we need to understand that everything we do will have a trade-off, will have a cost associated to it. It could have synergies, but more trade-offs than synergies. So our objective function as FAO is to achieve zero hunger and to provide healthy diets to everyone on Earth. And that will imply trade-offs. And we need to find ways to minimize those trade-offs. As you well explained, Dr. Rattan, there are trade-offs on the soil part, there are trade-offs on the land, on the water, and we need to find policies to minimize those because we are going to achieve those trade-offs. Our way of thinking right now has 4 accelerators in the way we are working in FAO. One is data and big data, and trying to bring as much as current data we can, real-time data, to the decision-making process so that farmers and also policymakers understand what is going on. Normally, our data is too slow because we follow political process, we follow a traditional way of collecting data. And that makes it not so useful. We need to change that. We need to accelerate that. So we are believing on a process in which we can use all the technologies we have and combine real-time data with the data that we traditionally collect because it's also extremely useful. We have enormous time series of information that will help us to understand what is happening in the world. But we need also real-time data. For example, during COVID-19 crisis, we immediately figured out that it was not only knowing how much production we have in the world, not only knowing how much stocks we had in the world, it was also knowing what was happening with the vessels, if they were moving or not, what was happening with the ports. And that is real-time information that helps us enormously to calm markets and to avoid more countries putting export restrictions. And those are damaging, okay? I understand a lot on the production side, but those policies of export restrictions could be very damaging to the world. And sometimes a lot more damaging than many of the things that happen on the supply side. So that's one of the core accelerators we have. The second accelerator is innovation, and the third one is technology. We have a lot of technology today available. The CIR has produced an enormous amount of technology and also the national research centers. But a lot of this technology, for many reasons, is not in the hands of the farmers. And we need to find a way to change that. We were just having a meeting in FAO with the Nobel Prize of Economics talking about digital technologies. And digital technologies are just a mean. They are not the panacea, are a mean that will help the process. And the reason is very simple, it's cost effective. But if we put the proper content, assume extension, no? Extension is have fight for years to find ways in which they can be more effective in distribute the knowledge that they have and the technologies they have. With digital technologies, we can do it, we can test different methods very quickly and see which are the methods that really work and adapt different methods for different realities. And we can transform the system faster, but we need to have the correct content. We need to have the correct elements of information. Also, innovation, because we need to be flexible. We need to find ways to change. And COVID-19 has shown us that we need to be flexible. We need to find ways to quickly adapt. And that's the new thing of agriculture. We're living in a world of uncertainty. We don't know what could happen tomorrow, but we need to have resilience to change that. And the final element is what we call complements. And complements include governance, human capital, and institutions. Those are central because I could be moving in technology, innovation, and data, But if I exclude smallholders, if I exclude sectors, I could be in a worse problem. So it could be that it's needed that this velocity of change with these three accelerators needs to be slow a little bit to put the proper governance, the proper institutions, and to have the proper human capital to work together. If it doesn't slow, great. But if we have to take the cost of slowing a little bit, I think it makes sense. So that's the way we think we can increase resilience. And here is central to think again and restructure the way we think of the deployment of infrastructure. Infrastructure could be a huge element to reduce inequality. It could be a huge element to connect to markets better. But normally when we use public work programs, for example, that we're going to use massive public work programs today to recover the economies, we just do it over it was done in the history. The roads where there were the mines before. The railroads where there were the mines before, to the ports. But we never think of using where the productive areas are today. Where is the rural areas and the agricultural productive areas? We need to change our way of thinking, work on intermediate cities, and trying to find ways in which we can create and use these public work programs to create infrastructure that will link what we produce and where we have potential to produce to the markets, and not to think in where the infrastructure was in the past. And that could increase and bring a double benefit to those reactivation programs that we're going to have. And that could help us enormously to increase our resilience. So again, just to summarize, and thank you again for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure, but I think data, innovation, technology, but complements are essential to be able to start this process of change and what I call the war against hunger, because it is unacceptable where we're living today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Máximo. I appreciate those comments. We all do. It's such a important contextual and contrasting piece, along with the biophysical piece that Dr. Lau just presented. We really need to be thinking about all of those. And I know our next speaker, Dr. Lawrence Haddad, who is the CEO of the Global Alliance to Improve Nutrition, better known as GAIN. Lawrence, as was earlier mentioned, is our third laureate speaking this morning. It's a great honor to have him here. And I have the feeling that he's going to be linking a third side of this a stool that we've had here with the biophysical, the economic infrastructure data with, I think, the food system that connects it. So Lawrence, may I turn this now over to you?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, World Food Prize, for inviting me to be on this panel with the FAO and the Alliance to End Hunger. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I was asked to comment on equity and access to improved food for food security and nutrition. And that's what I'm going to reflect on. The first point really is that you know, all hats off to the UN Rome-based agencies for producing this brilliant SOFIA report from a couple of months ago, and this astounding figure of 3 billion people that Máximo mentioned who cannot afford a healthy diet. And I think that is the new definition of the haves and have-nots. I think that's absolutely outrageous, that 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. When you break that down by continents, that is 3/4 of the African continent cannot afford a healthy diet. That's 1 billion people in Africa. That is outrageous and unacceptable. So how do you change that? How do you change food systems to make that much less of an issue? Well, in my mind, there are 3 major food system levers, 3 things that change the settings on food systems. One is consumer demand. What do consumers want? We need to change that. We need to work much harder to change that. Consumers have incredible power, but it's dissipated, it's not collectivized, it's not aggregated, and it's not animated. The second one is investors. Investors are often looking for commercial returns, mostly looking for commercial returns, but many of them are looking for purposeful returns and seeing these 2 circles as increasingly overlapping. And the third major lever is, of course, policy change. And that's the one I'm going to focus on, Rob, because, you know, the first 2, their job is not to equalize things. It's not to promote equity. But policy's role is to promote equity. It has enormous power to do this, and it has a responsibility to do it. It's a responsibility, that's one of the reasons we have public policy, to fix markets, to promote and support those who are left behind by markets and by technology. So four very simple areas, four simple things to say, difficult to do, but possible to do in the policy space. Agricultural R&D. What the international system and the national system, what crops is R&D, ag R&D focused on? It's overwhelmingly focused on staple crops. Absolutely essential to eradicate hunger, but we're in the 21st century now and we have additional problems as well as hunger. We need to not just feed the world, but nourish the world. And we need more ag R&D to be focused on the especially very nutritious crops, fruits, vegetables, eggs, dairy, pulses, nuts. Second area for public policy can make a huge difference is in a public procurement. The state is a massive purchaser of food for schools, for hospitals, for the prison system. Most of the food that's purchased by the state in most countries, nutritional value of that food is not a primary concern. How many calories they have, how cheap it is, those are the primary concerns. If we could just change the public procurement profile to include more nutritious foods, it would have an enormous impact, especially for those who are most vulnerable. Safety nets and social protection programs, whether they are cash-based or food-based, are targeting the most vulnerable in society. We did a review of the World Bank database on foods, on social protection programs just recently. Again, 200 social protections. How many of them explicitly mentioned nutritious foods? None of them. Fourth policy area that will make a huge difference, incentives to female entrepreneurs. Female entrepreneurs are systematically discriminated against, and this is in the food space, and this includes farmers, systematically discriminated against in terms of access to finance, access to land rights, access to information, access to networks. A public policy can do something about that. But, you know, we talk about what public policy can do, but what is the spark that can make public policy change? Well, I think, you know, we're in a very fluid moment right now. The impossible seems possible. The undoable seems doable. The unthinkable seems thinkable. This moment that we're in, this terrible moment, also has this dynamic and fluidity. And we must take advantage of that. And whenever I think of what drives change, Rob, I think of problem streams, solution streams, and political streams. So we have the problem stream, 3 billion people unable to afford a healthy diet. And as Máximo said, that is going to get only worse with COVID-19. What's the solution stream? We know a lot about what to do. Again, together with Hopkins and City University in London, we did a review of the last 12 major reports on food systems over the last 5 years. They list 200 distinct policy solutions. We know what to do, but the question is how to make it happen. And that brings me to the third stream, which is the political stream. How do you get policy to change? How do you get politics to be different? It's an age-old solution: pressure, discomfort, a force that becomes irresistible. Where does this pressure and discomfort come from? It comes from civil society networks, small business networks, adolescents and youth networks. In my country, I'm living in the UK right now. I can't leave for obvious reasons. I signed today a petition, a petition on a government website that was initiated by Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford is a famous footballer in the UK. He plays for Manchester United. He's 22. He is the spearhead behind kids getting free school meals outside of schools and for free school meals being extended. This policy would not happen without Marcus Rashford being on the radio every morning berating the government to do something differently. This finally brings me to my last point, Rob. One of the big objectives of the UN Food System Summit that has so much promise is to create this irresistible force that pushes and pulls stakeholders to co-construct and deliver lasting system change. And while there is great inequality in the world, and within food systems, there is also great commonality. And there is much more that unites us than divides us. And we should never forget that no group in society has a monopoly on the problems that are caused by food systems, whether they're climate, health, biodiversity, you name it, livelihoods. But also no group has a monopoly on the solutions to fix them. So we must all work together for our common good. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Lawrence. Again, so eloquently and elegantly stated, bringing the issue of equity to the fore, and then again, laying things out in a way that allow us to go from think tank to action tank. And I think that last point in particular about civil society, advocacy, David Beckmann's life work is in that space in terms of, and so it's wonderful to remind us of that. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A, and we have a number of questions that have come in. I'm going to do my best to try to synthesize a little bit, given the time we have. Dr. Lal, there are several questions coming in about where we should be going with research on soils, soil biota. There's questions about mycorrhiza. There's questions about what do you think some of the most compelling research areas are to provide this very holistic approach that you laid out in your talk, starting at that soil level.
Thank you, Rob. We are using 200 million tons of fertilizers globally every year. I know Africa is using only 17 kilogram per hectare compared to the world of 135 kilogram per hectare. Some countries using as much as 400 and more kilogram per hectare. Globally, we have to reduce the fertilizer use from 200 million ton, hopefully by 2100, no more than 100 million ton. And to do that, mycorrhiza, rhizobium, recycling, these are going to become very critical factors. So that's one part. So focusing on how to improve the efficiency of use. The nitrogen efficiency under ideal conditions in the US may be 40%. In China and India, probably somewhere between 20 and 30%. So doubling the efficiency, tripling the efficiency, reducing the total rate, increasing mycorrhiza, other part very important. The other component is when soils do not have adequate level of organic matter content, which should be about 3 to 4% in the top layer. Very rarely it is more than 0.5% in soils of sub-Saharan Africa and that of South Asia. So improving the organic matter content will also improve the efficiency, and that is a major factor governing the biodiversity in soil. That's the food for the microorganism. So improving soil organic matter content will increase the efficiency, reduce the rate required, and improve biodiversity. Disease suppressive soil also depend on the soil biodiversity and organic matter content. So that is really where the priority should lie, recarbonization of soil and soil health.
Rattan, maybe I'll just build on that to pick up a couple other questions. Thank you for that answer. One is, what are the best methods for rebuilding the carbon and measuring that in the soil? I know we can't get too technical, but someone has asked that question. And then the other piece is, another questioner has talked about climate smart agriculture, and I have the feeling you can probably connect those two things. But if you could, the best methods for monitoring and verifying the carbon sequestration and the value of good soil health management.
Well, I'll try to also answer the first part. Rob said how to. The how to part is soil carbon is just like a bank account. If you want to improve your bank account, what you put into the soil must be more than what you draw. And same thing, soil carbon, what you put into the soil should be more than what it is losing. And the losing of carbon from soil happens by erosion, by decomposition, and by leaching. So erosion control, reducing, somehow moderating the decomposition and leaching losses, and creating a positive carbon ecosystem, what I call increasing the input more than by biochar, by no-till farming, cover cropping, and so forth. How do you measure and monitor? We have a tremendous progress being made. We do have devices which can monitor by remote sensing techniques, many of them through either drone-based or through aeroplane-based low-flying sensor which can detect surrogate possibility, color of the soil, albedo, maybe temperature regime, moisture content, because they are very closely related. So tremendous progress is being made on that. But one thing I want to mention that when we talk about payment for ecosystem services, it is not essential that we monitor carbon stock in every acre of land. We did not monitor runoff and erosion when the CRP payments are made. We simply took the landside imagery, how the farmers are doing. So I think we can adopt for a given soil type what we know from the universities and institutions around in that area, what are the rates are, and therefore it is easier to plus minus 5%, those rates should be applicable. Occasionally we can do verification. Very quickly, climate smart agriculture is a nice word. That means if that is correct, there must be climate stupid agriculture also somewhere. Obviously, we have some of those issues. I think the proper word is climate resilient agriculture. The climate is changing, and how could the agriculture bounce back and be resilient to the disturbances caused by extreme event? And that really goes back again the bedrock of that sustainability and the resilience or climate smart is soil health. They are linked together. When you have better soil health, then the drought flood syndrome, high temperature wave that happens, many of those things are moderated. So soil health restoration is the critical climate smart agriculture component.
Thank you, Rattan. Thank you very much. I'm going to try to move to some of the questions that are coming in that are post-harvest. So for example, we have a question about fruit markets in Peru and the fact that in the formal marketing sector, you can buy imported fruits and vegetables from Chile and elsewhere, but the locally grown produce isn't penetrating into the formal markets. And that was directed towards Dr. Torero, but then I also want to pick up on the points for Lawrence and for Máximo, the issue of infrastructure. Someone points out that yes, it's as Lawrence called for, greater attention to some of the non-cereal commodities. They're very important for nutrition. Many of those are more perishable, so they have implications as well for market access. So maybe we'll start with you, Máximo, and then go on to you, Lawrence.
No, sure. And I think the issue of supermarkets or local markets or local producers is an important issue. And it's linked to several elements. It's linked to standards, it's linked to food safety issues that we need to keep into consideration. And the more inclusive you are in terms of access to markets, the better it will be. But that requires the complements I was talking about. If you don't have the complements in place, then it will be very difficult to achieve that. I don't see nothing bad that in a supermarket you can find produce from every part of the world. I don't think that is wrong. I think that what you want is that your producers can also supply those supermarkets and comply with the standards to supply those supermarkets. And there could be also local markets that comply with the standards. Today, there is a lot of discussion about wet markets, for example, and the zoonotic diseases that are behind the wet markets. The important thing, most of these are informal markets. You cannot go and ban them. Nobody will close them. You need to bring the standards behind. You need to bring the food safety measures behind so that they operate properly. And of course, then the ban will make sense, but you cannot ban them because they are informal. So again, I think that we need to understand ways in which we can improve all these mechanisms and have smallholders to link to these markets. But what is important is that the markets also provide the incentives, because if a farmer makes the effort to create the standard, for example, provides aflatoxin-free maize, and he goes to the market to sell their maize, and the market doesn't recognize that effort and pays the same price to a farmer that has aflatoxin not free maize, then why he's going to invest? And that's part of the role of the governments. They need to put regulations in place because we want aflatoxin-free maize. We don't want maize with aflatoxins. So I think that's really important, and it's also linked to infrastructure. And the example you provide of the need of cooling storage is really important. So one of the problems we face right now, especially with COVID-19, is that the demand for high-value commodities in the world will shrink. The demand for the exports of developing countries, the mangoes from Senegal that is produced mostly by smallholders, the mangoes from Peru, which are produced by smallholders in the north part. Of course, you have medium and large, but a lot of the mangoes that go to the UK are from smallholders collected in the farmers, is that their demands will shrink because of the recession. And these farmers don't have an option, and this will be left in the field. This will increase losses, what we call left in the field. It will increase food losses because in the local market, they won't be able to sell it at a price that is convenient for them. So they will not even harvest them. And that's where it comes to, okay, how can I increase the resilience of this farmer? How I can give him a window of 6 months? How I can add value to that commodity that is in the tree so that he can process it and produce it. And that's where cooling storage facilities work. And it's a huge opportunity because if you develop a proper infrastructure, you locate properly the storage facilities, and the banks are investing a lot of money right now in agriculture because of the COVID-19. But if you invest that properly in these type of infrastructures, you are providing the farmers an option that during the crisis, they can store for 6 or 9 months. They can increase the value, bring bioeconomic concept behind. You can increase the value added to that commodity and create a market for that. So all these type of investments, I think, is the way we need to go right now on this money that we are using, instead of putting that money in subsidies, which will be depleted very quickly. And the last point is the issue of how distorted agriculture is in the world. So today we have an agricultural sector that is extremely distorted because the subsidies that we provide are mostly done to staples and not to high value commodities. And we are talking that we need to provide healthy diets. We are talking that we need to diversify. We did some simulations in trying to say what will happen if I shift part of that subsidy to staples into other types of sectors. And basically it's a win-win strategy. We will increase, it will be welfare improving. So again, I think that we need to put a lot of pressure in rethinking these things, because these are really important elements in the world food system that normally we don't talk too much. And I think it's important to start talking about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Maximo. Lawrence, would you like to comment on this general issue of markets and?
Sure. I'll be very brief, Rob. But thank you for the question on food loss, food waste. Food loss, food waste is nutrient loss, and nutrient waste, it's soil loss and soil waste, and it's environment loss and environment waste. So it's a very, very important issue. It's an issue that we surprisingly don't know enough about. I mean, Máximo and his team are doing the best they can in terms of setting up databases to track loss, but it's not nearly enough, as I think he'd be the first to admit. We just don't have the data we need. And even more sparingly, we just don't have the research. We don't know enough about the strategies to minimize food loss and food waste, whether they're programmatic or policy. And on infrastructure, you know, infrastructure is so important because it's so expensive to lay down, and once you've laid it down, it's very difficult to change it. And that may change as we get into the world of drones and apps and so on and so forth. But for physical infrastructure, it's really hard to change it once you've designed it and invested in it. So it's really important to think about what is it for. And you know, you can think of infrastructure that is nutrition sensitive. I'll give you an example. We were looking at the food system dashboard. We were doing a presentation of the dashboard a couple of weeks ago. And we were comparing Kenya and Uganda. And we were looking at vegetables in Kenya, and productivity is through the roof in Kenya and much higher than in Uganda. But of course, most of that is for export, which is important because it generates foreign exchange for the country. But then you look at the domestic price of vegetables in Kenya compared to Uganda, and the domestic price in Kenya is much higher than it is in Uganda. And the consumption of vegetables domestically in Kenya is much lower than it is in Uganda. So the infrastructure you develop for export, it doesn't necessarily provide massive spillovers for the domestic market. Over.
Well, that's a really great point. It ties back into Máximo's point earlier about infrastructure. And also, I think, Dr. Lal, you coined a phrase there when you said food loss and waste is a crime against nature, and Lawrence has just picked up on that. So great messages coming through here. Lawrence, before I move on, someone else, someone who knows you, I think, Robin Marsh, wrote in and said, what role do you think small-scale home food production can play in reducing under and malnutrition, specifically home and community vegetable gardens? Maybe I'd push you to add to that locally oriented production, but picking up on the last point you were just making about Uganda and Kenya.
I mean, I thank you, Rob, and nice moderation and connection, by the way. But I think as we, as we are moving into a more uncertain world, or maybe we've just been in it, but we haven't realized it. I think risk mitigation and risk management is going to become even more important, as well as resilience. Resilience is important, but sometimes we can't be resilient to certain shocks. We just have to figure out how to manage them as best we can. And I do think shorter value chains are going to become, I think value chains and supply chains are going to become shorter spatially and also temporally. And I do think diversity of production and diversity of consumption and diversity in general, which is a very generic but very powerful risk mitigation strategy. I think we'll see a lot more of that. So I think, and especially in times of COVID, when you can't go to markets and you can't transport vegetables easily, I think home-produced foods and vegetables are going to become even more important. But what I would be looking for is, what are the system settings? What are the food system settings that are constraining home gardens and community gardens? I feel like home gardens and community gardens are a great option, but they're hitting the constraints within the food system too much. Is there something in policy? Is there something can we connect home gardens to social protection programs? Is there something, can we aggregate home gardens in a way that makes them attractive to private investors? That we need to figure out how to unleash things like home gardens and community gardens to really scale and really have massive impact. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Lawrence. And I think so much of the literature actually points to the fact that the degree to which home and community production, particularly of these higher nutrient, higher value vegetable crops, can be linked to markets, the more sustainable they tend to be. So I think your policy point there is very well taken. Rattan, I'd like to come back to you. We have Stephen Brunn asks, can you comment on the impacts of herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides on soil health? How can we leverage biodiversity to decrease the need for pesticides? And I ask that particularly, Rattan, in relation to this area we've just been discussing in horticultural systems, where the use of inputs tends to be more intensive even than in a major row crop system, say. And I just am curious if you'd like to comment on that.
Yes, I certainly would. Before I do that, though, I want to go back to the question of urbanization for a moment. I fully agree that home, lawns, and gardens are very important, especially in the disruptive atmosphere such as now. The other part I wanted to mention that was we have 37 cities, which are mega cities, more than 10 million people. And a city of 10 million people requires 6,000 tons of food per day. So we got Tokyo and Delhi, more than 30 million people. So you can imagine requiring 20,000 tons of food per day. I think in future, a certain proportion of food, 15, 20%, has to be produced within the city limits by recycling water and nutrients. By 2100, we are going to have 83 megacities. One of them, Lagos, Nigeria, will be more than 80 million people. So urban agriculture, sky farming are very critical part. I want coming back to the fungicide and herbicide. One thing I want to mention that all the pesticides, active ingredient, 8 to 10 kilogram of carbon is required to produce 1 kilogram of active ingredient of fungicide, herbicide, pesticide, insecticide. They are very carbon intensive until we find non-carbon fuel sources. So somewhere we have to minimize the dependence in addition to the quality of water and impact on biodiversity. That was the main issue. So horticulture gardening and other compost use, a mature compost creates disease suppressive soils. That's proven. There are a lot of hypotheses. There are a lot of chapters on books and journal articles written on it. That's a fact. So having compost, having biodiversity in soil that creates disease, that minimizes the dependence on pesticide, good crop rotation. So we do all those that, and after that, if something is done properly, yes, some insecticides, pesticides can be used, but prudently and discriminately. Remember, the difference between poison and remedy is a dose. Sometimes it is an indiscriminate use of pesticide and herbicides and insecticide which has created problem. So it's like 1 aspirin versus 100 aspirin. Same thing. Use it prudently, judicially. Use technology with wisdom. That is really the key. We can't hear you, Rob.
Thank you, Rattan. We have a couple more questions that I don't think we're going to have time to get to, but I want to just leave. They were for Máximo. I apologize, Máximo, about the future of digitization and what it means for farmer adoption. And then a related question on the fact that, you implied that you said that some technologies are not making it into the hands of farmers. And so I wish we could hear more from you on that. Maybe there'll be another time to do that. I think I do need to move on, though, now to our last speaker, who's going to help us pull this together and then very much put it in context. We mentioned at the outset that we would be having, this is all taking place in the context of food systems and the UN Food Systems Summit that we'll be looking forward to next year. So this is all leading up to that. And we have Martin Frick, the Deputy to the Special Envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit at 21, to maybe share some reactions to what he's heard this morning and also the outlook for some of the key things we ought to be looking for as we all work towards next year's summit. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Rob, and that is certainly a tall order to speak after this stellar panel. Let me start with something that Professor Lal had said, and congratulations to the World Food Prize. That is more than well earned. This is really about world peace. And if that sounds like a tall order, world peace is certainly not a state of the world in which the people of 80 jumbo jets are dying every single day. This is not how world peace looks like, and this is not how you build political stability. FAO was built 75 years ago with that in mind, in the experience of the Second World War. That is the very DNA of the United Nations. And I would argue that hunger, eradication of hunger, and living within planetary boundaries is maybe the #1 issue for the United Nations these days. This can only be done with an approach to inclusive multilateralism, what we are trying to do in this summit, and I come to it in a second. The second bit I take from this morning's conversation is climate. We need a safe operating space for humanity. That's a sentence I stole from Johan Rockström when he published some years back his work on planetary boundaries in nature. And indeed, if we are looking into international processes such as the climate negotiations and upcoming COP26, we need to anchor the national conversations of climate plans in food production and particularly in soils. Because soil, and this is so obvious after Professor Lal spoke, is so central for the well-being of a nation. Just think about the Dust Bowl and the works of John Steinbeck as a telling example here. But if we are speaking in the climate space today so much about nature-based solutions, with soil, we have a solution that doesn't only work to get the climate crisis under control, but to lift people out of poverty and to serve farmers, because our success is the success of farmers, and we have to build on that. My next point, soil health is human health. And yesterday there was a great panel when Dr. Tedros from the World Health Organization said the #1 COVID-19 response is to get nutritious food to people, and they are not having access to nutritious food. Lauren's point, nothing shows more the lack of equity than 3 billion people who do not have access to nutritious food in order to keep themselves healthy. And it's telling to see that in state procurement, Lawrence, you made this point, there is not a word about nutritious food when it's so central to health for everybody. David Beckmann has reminded us of the need of international solidarity. And indeed, equity is being built on access to healthy and safe food, which needs to be at the very center of what we are doing. So speaking about the summit, and I think I have 4 minutes left, please do look at this summit, not as a moment in time, but as an engagement process, which is starting right now and will certainly not end by September next year when we are coming to the summit moment. It's really an honor that the 2 World Food Prize laureates that we have on this call are also engaged in the food summit. One is we have 5 action tracks: access to safe and nutritious food, changing to sustainable consumption patterns, change to nature positive production, building sustainable livelihoods and resilience against shocks. And Lawrence is leading action track #1, and I'm happy to say that Professor Lal is a part of our scientific group, which will particularly look into the nature positive production. And that is, of course, centrally about building up soil health. 2 last remarks. We will have an engagement process in which we are coming to every country of the UN membership to have a series of 3 food system summit dialogues to really bring all of the stakeholders together to realize this approach of inclusive multilateralism. And we have a group of fantastic champions who will help us push the concept out, motivate people. This is more than anything a bottom-up approach. This is an approach where, with a little bit of experience in diplomacy, I can say I have never seen anything that is built so from the ground up, so inclusive. And I very much hope that all of the civil society, all of the farmers associations, indigenous representatives are here to support us and to bring their voices to heads of states and heads of governments for a really inclusive process, and hopefully for a very strong outcome and many, many positive actions to build the equity, to build health, and to build climate security for this planet. Thank you very much, and back to you, Rob.
Thank you so much, Martin, for those really encouraging vision that you've laid out regarding the summit. We're very fortunate that you and along with Agnes Kalabata are leading that, and how grateful we are too to people like Lawrence, Máximo, Rattan, and others who are joining in that effort. So wonderful to hear this. I am going to look to Vim to see if we were going to have another video. Is Vim there I'm not sure if we were going to have one more video.
No,
oh, there we go. Come on in, Vim.
No, just to say that I think we have reached the time that we had. So we would just thank everyone and come to a close.
All right, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to cheat and ask Máximo to come back in for 1 minute on those 2 points that I raised, and then I'll be very brief in tying us up. Back to you, Máximo.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Rob. No, very quickly, I don't want to take more time. On infrastructure, I think the question of the CIR was really important. We need to build infrastructure for smallholders, and we need to be smart in the way we get them closer to them. So the storage facilities that we are talking and the cooling facilities are basically targeted to locations where there is big populations of smallholders, because they are the ones who need this technology. But if we are smart, even these storage facilities can be linked to the financial system. So it's innovating on the current warehouse systems that we have, using digital technologies and allowing farmers to have better access to to financial markets. In terms of access to technologies and to innovation, look, we need to revolutionize the way we do extension, no? And that is linked to digital, but digital with good content capability and access, but also the complements I was referring, so that the institutions and regulation are in place. We need to bring science to the technology so farmers can make the correct choice.
Thank you so much, because I did
Rob,
want to, yes.
If you did start the cheating process, then let's have the 1-minute video and have the World Food Day promoted.
Oh, good. I thought, okay, thank you. Let's do the video.
James?
Please stay on if you can.
كان والدي دائم الابتسام وكان يعمل راعيا للماشية. لقد علمني أن الغذاء هو سبيل السعادة.
Porque los caminos que recorremos se entrelazan, dando vida a una infinita variedad de historias.
Les poissons que je pêche chaque jour, on ne les trouve que dans ces eaux.
我们提供粮食，滋养生命。
E noi dobbiamo nutrire il mondo.
It's time to take action.
We all have a role to play.
Давайте добьемся лучшего в жизни и в обществе повсюду.
We need a food system that sustains lives, the planet, and protects its workers.
لأن مصيرنا واحد، أفعالنا هي مستقبلنا.
Wonderful. So that really tied a lot together there. So glad we could get to that, Vim. Thank you. And thanks to everyone. I think it was wonderful to hear how the work of this year's laureate, Dr. Rattan Lal, has put in the foundation, the environmental foundation for, and the agricultural productivity foundation and sustainability foundation to the human and economic outcomes that Lawrence and Máximo and Martin reminded us all of. So thank you all again, especially FAO and the Alliance to End Hunger, such a great event, and to our laureates. Congratulations again to Dr. Lal. And Martin, so glad. We look forward to staying close to you and Agnes and the rest of the team as we go forward to next year. So thanks everyone. Really a pleasure to be here and moderate this event. Bye everyone.
Thank you. And thank you, Rob, for this great job. Fantastic.
That's my pleasure. It was fun. It was so interesting. We've got to get that presentation from Rattan. Everybody wants it. So,
oh yes, we will be posting that as well as a recording of this whole event. So it will be online.
Wonderful, Vim. Thank you and your team. I know this was a big effort on the FAO North America office to put this all together. So thank you so much.
And thank you, all of you, Dr. Lal, Dr. Haddad, Martin, Máximo, for joining in. Thanks, Rattan.
Thank you so much, FAO and Alliance. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.